Okay, hi there. This is Dr. Muin Hasib, the Accreditation and Quality Consultant, with another topic on accreditation and quality for clinical laboratories. This is lesson 1 out of 4 on the topic of CAB, calibration, verification, and linearity surveys, the know-how. In lesson 1, we'll have for you a brief introduction. Then we'll define the calibration verification. Then we'll talk about when and how often calibration verification required. What is the difference between calibration verification, AMR, and linearity? Which laboratory sections are required to perform calibration verification, AMR, and how often? What materials can you use to perform calibration verification, linearity, and to verify the AMR? How do you perform calibration verification, linearity, and the AMR? And under that topic, we'll cover the in-house method and the commercial and the commercial method. In lesson 1, we'll just talk about the in-house method, and we'll tell you how do you interrupt the result and prepare your report. And we'll have a lesson summary. In lesson 2, we'll continue with how do you perform calibration verification, linearity, and AMR. And we'll talk about the second method for that, which is commercial or purchase method. And under that, we'll cover where do you buy your calibration verification, linearity material, how do you perform the CVL using CAB, CVL surveys materials, how do you read the CVL result or report, and we'll have a lesson summary for you. In lesson 3, we'll continue how do you perform calibration verification, linearity for the AMR. We'll continue with the second method, which is the commercial method. And under that, we'll talk about how do you evaluate and investigate your CVL result report, and how do you prepare your own report. And we'll talk about most common questions and answer regarding the CVL surveys or product. Okay, and we'll have a lesson summary for you. In lesson 4, we'll have for you examples of diagnostic plots, interpretations, and suggested action taken from linearity troubleshooting reports. And we'll talk about most common question and answer regarding calibration verification surveys, and we'll have a subject summary for you. So let's start with lesson 1, and start with a brief introduction about the subject. What is your reaction when you receive your CVL result report? Do these terms scare you? Linearity, AMR, calibration verification, CVL surveys? Well, you are not alone. Many experienced lab managers, supervisors, technologists, and quality managers have expressed confusion when reading and evaluating the CAB CVL survey reports. Question like, why did I receive a different rating? And what can I do to fix this? What does it mean if the report indicate my samples are linear but not verified? And much, much more. In these 4 lessons, I'm gonna answer these questions and much more. So let's start. First, we need to define what is calibration verification. But before we define calibration verification, we need to define what is calibration. Calibration is the process of testing and adjusting instrument or test system readout in order to establish a correlation between the instrument's measurement of the substance being tested and the actual concentration of that substance. In other words, calibration sets the instrument to give an accurate result for each analyte. Calibration tells the instrument how to read certain analytes' concentrations. What should you do if your calibration fails? Basically, obviously, you need to repeat it. If your calibration fails, just repeat it. If the instrument is factory calibrated, consult with the manufacturer of the test system. What are calibration materials? Calibration materials could be called standards or calibrators. They are solution or lymphocyzed preparation that contain a known amount. That's a key word, a known amount. A known amount or concentration of the substance or the analyte being measured by a method. So the calibrator has a known amount, and it gives you that amount when you analyze it. Okay, so a 0 amount calibrator will give you 0, a 5 will give you 5, a 10 will give you 10. Okay, it does not give you 4.9 for a 5 or 0.1 for a 0. Gives you the exact number that the calibrator contain. What is calibration verification? Calibration verification, it is the assaying of materials of known concentration in the same manner as patient samples to substantiate the instrument or test system calibration throughout the reportable range for patient test result. In other words, calibration verification confirms or checks to see that the current calibration setting remain valid for the method or the analyte. In other words, calibration verification verifies, just from the name, calibration verification verifies that my calibration for that analyte or test is still working. When and how often is calibration verification is required? The laboratory is responsible for performing calibration verification for each analyte measured by the test system every 6 months or more, often if specified in the manufacturer test system instruction. The laboratory established schedule that a test system or analyte requires more frequent calibration verification than the manufacturer suggestion. There is a change in reagent lot, reagent formation, or reagent manufacturer used for the test, unless you can document proof that the change of reagent does not affect the calibration verification. Also, if there is a major preventive maintenance or replacement of critical parts, and who decide if you need to repeat the calibration or verify the calibration for if you have major preventive maintenance is the engineer who did change the part on your instrument. If they say recheck the calibration or repeat it, then you do. If not, then you don't. If the control material also do not perform as expected, then you need to verify the calibration. Now, what is the difference between calibration verification, AMR, and linearity? Calibration verification, it is the assaying of materials of known concentration in the same manner as patient sample to substantiate the instrument or test system calibration throughout the reportable range for a patient test result. The AMR, or analytical measurement range, on the other hand, is the range of analyte values a method can directly measure on a specimen from minimum to maximum without any dilution or concentration. Linearity is the ability to provide results that are directly proportional to concentration of the analyte in the test sample. CAP defines linearity as a straight line relationship between observed value and expected values. In other words, AMR, linearity, and calibration verification, they all mean the same thing if the material you are using cover the range of the AMR. Again, AMR, calibration verification, and linearity, they all mean the same thing if the material you are using cover the range of the AMR. Do you have to buy your CBL material from CAP? No, you don't. You don't have to buy the material from CAB. You can have your own, as I will describe, if you can come up with the specimens needed, or you can buy it from some other source who provide linearity products. Now, which laboratory sections are required to perform calibration verification in AMR, and how often? For chemistry and serology, requires both calibration verification and AMR at least every 6 months. So if the test system calibration procedure, however, include at least 3 calibrators that cover the range of the AMR, then you are exempt from this requirement. Okay. For hematology, linearity studies are not required for blood count for CBC's instrument. Okay. It is considered met if the laboratory follow the manufacturer instructions. And for hematology, usually the vendor or the manufacturer or the supplier, they send you every 6 months what they call a calibration kit. Either they come and do it for you, or they send it to you and you run on your instrument, and you should be okay if it passes. That substitute for the calibration verification and linearity. If you are not getting this kit from your vendor, ask for it, because should be part of your contract, part of your instrument purchasing. Okay, how about coagulation? Coagulation, well, you need to check to see what kind of system do you have. Coagulation test based on direct measurement of analyte require AM verification every 6 months. If you have a clot-based test, you do not require AMR verification. So just verify, do you have a direct measurement of the analyte or clot-based system? If it's a clot-based system, it's not required. For flow cytometry, also, checklist does not specify that they need it, so they are exempt from it. What material can you use to perform calibration verification linearity? Proficiency testing samples from CAB or another provider you can use. Okay, that span the range of the AMR, or part of it. You could use a BT sample, for example, for the high or the low or the middle, as I will talk about. Patient specimen with known values. Okay, commercial calibrator standard, linearity material, QC material. You need to have an acceptable value and range for your sample and material. You can use something like this, or based on a medical decision, you can have your own acceptable criteria based on a medical decision. Example plus minus 10%, or total allowable error from the CBL report. So for your material, you can use PT, you can use calibrators, you can use commercial products specified for that issue. Also, you can use a QC. So you can use all QC, all calibrators, all PT, or commercial product, or a combination. Yani one sample could be from PT, one sample could be from QC, could be one of calibrators. Okay. So your acceptable criteria, again, you could use this are greater than 0.975, the slope between 0.9 to 1.1, based on a medical decision, plus minus 10%, or total allowable error from the CBL report, or supplied by the provider. If you buy a commercial product, they might give you an acceptable criteria. Okay. Right. Okay, now how do you perform calibration verification linearity in the AMR? You can perform it by two options: an in-house available in the laboratory material like the calibrators, patient samples or QC, or previously analyzed BT, or commercial purchase material. Okay. So in this lesson, we'll talk about the in-house method. Okay. How do you do it? If you get your materials gathered together, whether they are patients, they are QC or calibrators, okay. Run at least 3 levels of material. One should be low, one high, and one at midpoint that span the range. So, like say, if you have a range around, say, from 10 to 100, then you need one around 10, one around 100, one around 50. Okay. So you run these material the same manner and in the test mode that you do run patient samples. How do you interrupt your result and prepare your report? Plot data on a linear graph, like a lab spreadsheet, commercial program, like an AB evaluator, manufacturer material program. Then you should get a straight line. We'll show you an example of it on the next slide. Compare your result to the expected values. Be sure to keep a written documentation each time you perform calibration verification approved by the medical director or designee. May use the below values for acceptable criteria if you like. Okay. Note, if you do not get a straight line and you are not within the acceptable criteria, or you need to recalibrate and repeat the above procedure again. So this is how you will get, let's say if you are using 3 or 5, this is how your linearity graphs should look like, or calibration verification. I'm done with lesson 1. لا لازم أعيد عادي. Lesson 1 summary. As applicable, the laboratory is responsible for performing calibration verification AMR for each analyte measured by the test system every 6 months. For chemistry, it's required unless the calibrators cover the range of the AMR, then they become exempt. CBC, they are exempt. You need to get the calibration kit from your vendor twice per year, and that will satisfy the requirement. For coagulation, if you have a direct measure based, you need it. If you have a class based system, you don't need it. You are exempt. For flow cytometry, it's not required. You are exempt. Calibration verification, linearity, and AMR, they all mean the same if the material you are using cover the range of the AMR. You don't have to buy your CVL material from CAB. You can have your own material. If you can come up with 3 specimens that span the range of the AMR, or you can buy from CAB or from other available sources. To perform calibration verification linearity, you can use proficiency testing, previously analyzed, of course, or from CBL products from CAB or another provider. You can use patient samples with known values. You can use calibrators. You can use the QC. You can perform calibration verification linearity in AMR by 2 options: an in-house method, like I explained to you, or commercial purchased material. Need to have an acceptable criteria or range for your sample or material. I am done with lesson 1 on calibration verification linearity surveys the know-how. To continue with the subject, please go to lesson 2. In lesson 2, we'll continue with how do you perform calibration verification linearity, and in lesson 2 we'll talk about the commercial method, and under that we will cover where do you buy your calibration verification linearity material, how do you perform CVL using CAB CVL survey material, how do you read the CVL result report, and a lesson summary. Thank you for watching.